Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of the Four Guys Roundtable Show. I am one of your hosts. Hello, guys. So, my name's Joe, aka Theo. You can call me Joe, you can call me Theo, you can call me whatever you want. So, tonight is episode one of our show. So, I welcome everybody who's going to be watching and listening to the show. And hopefully, we have more to come after this. So, I'll get this ball rolling. So, what we're going to do first is we're going to do a little intro of everybody. So, like I said, my name's Joe, aka Theo. So, people call me. So, whatever you want to, roundabout, go for it. So first, give you a little background on me. Cubs hat, Cubs shirt, got some Chicago memorabilia in the background. Originally from Chicago. You can put your thumbs down, whatever, because Philadelphia sucks. So let's start that off right there. So I eat, breathe, leave. I eat, breathe, live, shit, die, repeat Chicago sports. All right. So that's me. In regards to that. I would say growing up, of course, being from Chicago, who wouldn't watch Michael Jordan? He was one of my guys. Probably my other people I was huge fans of is, Walter Payton and Ryan Sandberg, Jeremy Roenick of my Blackhawks. Those are the people I, watch the most for the most part. Those are my guys growing up. Right now, basketball, whatever. The Bulls are what they are. They suck. I'll be the first to admit it. The Bears, whatever. I guess I'm a Khalil Mack fan. There's no one else really to root for. All my other guys like Urlacher and Briggs are gone. Peanut Tillman. Baseball, Rizzo, Chris Bryant, whatever. Those guys, love those guys. And hockey, which you guys need to get more into hockey. I don't know what the fuck your problems are, guys. Besides Pat, him and his shitty ass New York teams. But anyway, Mike Caden, Patrick Kane, and Jonathan Tate, those two are my guys. But whatever, I'm ranting. It is what it is. Like I said, it's easy. Chicago, and it ends there. So I'm gonna hand this off to my big dude who's in my bottom right corner of my screen. He goes by Darth Pat. I don't, whatever. So take it off and then explain yourself, please.
Good evening, Rebel Scum.
That's right. Rebel Scum.
Theo there said, I am Darth Pat. Basically, I grew up a New York sports team fan, being from Northern Jersey originally, now living here in the vast emptiness that is Pennsylvania.
It is an emptiness. Hence why I moved.
Emptiness to it. And I live in one of the more interesting parts of Pennsylvania. But anyway, in terms of me growing up, favorite athlete by far was the great Dave Winfield. Being a Yankees fan, it was always fun. It was always a kind of back and forth. If you were a Yankees fan in the '80s, were you a Winfield fan or were you a Don Mattingly fan? My older sister loved Mattingly. I loved Winfield, and our arguments got to be about as heated as supposedly they were in the Yankee clubhouse during those years. So, but I was always a Winfield guy. Hey, he's the Hall of Famer, so there. Also, of course, was a big Lawrence Taylor fan because if your first memory of ever watching a football game is Super Bowl 21, then you're going to be a big Lawrence Taylor fan, especially when your parents get the video cassette that highlights the entire 1986 Giants season, which is when Lawrence Taylor won the MVP, and he was so freaking dominant. And just nothing to highlight of LT running over offensive tackles and pounding quarterbacks into the turf. So, you're going to like that when you're growing up. If I wanted to say who I was liking in basketball and hockey as a kid, I didn't get into hockey until the Rangers were on their Stanley Cup run. So obviously it was Mark Messier, I think, because he was the main guy there. Basketball, and again, it was Patrick Ewing. So, yeah. As far as now, I find it funny in a way, even though I'm the youngest of the four guys here. Just wanted to throw that out there. I find it kind of funny to be a big fan of athletes who are younger than me. I don't know why. I just find that funny. I guess I've just got to the age where I realize now, shit, I'm older than everybody who's actually playing pro sports anymore, with a couple of exceptions. So but nah, not really. But
he's an old soul.
Yeah, I'm an old soul.
doesn't get you
I,
anywhere.
I've been dead inside since I turned 20. No. But if I had to say
Hence
who
the
my
darts
favorite
part.
guys,
Okay.
if I had to say who my favorite guys are now, again, going through the 4 sports teams for me, which again would be, Yankees, Giants, Rangers, Knicks. Yankees, it's got to be Aaron Judge. I mean, he's the most Winfield-like guy that I think I've ever seen in a lot of ways. For the Giants, Saquon Barkley, I mean, a guy who's from the area where, I live right now, went to Penn State, which of course is my college team for football, and then gets drafted by my friend. It's always going to be him. Hockey right now, I guess you could still say it's Lundqvist, even though he's getting towards the end of his career. I'm hoping that Kako, being that he's so young and so highly touted, will become a superstar. Of course, I like Panarin this year too, since he's been really great for the Rangers. And for the Knicks, do they still exist?
Barely.
I swear to God, there's a team that plays pro basketball in Madison Square Garden, but I don't remember if they're still called the Knicks.
Maybe you should become a Brooklyn fan. Might be better off for you.
I have this one of these things that I think happens, that even if you're from Jersey but you grew up rooting for the New York teams, you looked at all those teams that played in Jersey, which is, I mean, really just the Devils and the Nets, as being, just vastly inferior. So it's like, I don't think I could ever actually become a Brooklyn fan. But
you don't want to root for Kyrie and KD? Come on now.
Well, where did Kyrie go to school?
I forget. That's why.
Yeah, I went to Duke, and I'm a UNC fan, so don't see myself becoming a Nets fan because of Kyrie. I mean, I always like the.
He probably took money. Probably took money like Zion.
That's going to be fun. So, okay, but that's me in a nutshell in terms of my teams and who I like. So, with that, I will let this conversation go over to the guy flouting his Golden State shirt over there, Mr. AJ Nitro.
So I'm AJ Nitro. I've a little bit more traveled than these gentlemen. I've lived in several states. Unfortunately, I grew up in the I grew up in the toilet bowl of America, better known as Cleveland, Ohio.
Cubs in 7.
I spent the first 20-something years of my life here, and when I was a kid, I guess I've always wanted to be different from where I lived. So I do not like any of the teams here. I've never liked any of the teams here. So when I was a kid, John Elway was my favorite athlete as a kid, and around these parts, they don't really like him because he beat the Clowns every year, just about. So I think that helped me not like the teams here because everybody didn't like him. So the animosity grew for me over time. So my favorite basketball player as a kid was Larry Bird. I grew up watching the Celtics. My favorite baseball player was probably Kirby Puckett. So, but I wasn't necessarily a Twins fan. It was just more like Kirby Puckett for me. So once he left, I didn't really like the Twins, and I didn't really watch hockey when I was a kid. So I can't really lay claim to anything with hockey. When I was in college, I liked Colorado. I liked the Avalanche. So I guess Joe Sakic was probably my favorite player. He's probably my all-time favorite hockey player. So fortunately for me, at some point in my life, I moved out of this dumpster fire of a state, and I moved to Pennsylvania, where I met these 3 knuckleheads, and it was better there for me. I felt like I belonged there more. I never really felt like I belonged in Ohio. So as an adult, I guess my Peyton Manning was one of my favorite players, and Jeremy, you see the Peyton Manning jersey hanging in the background for him. So me and him actually share that. I was very fortunate because he ended up playing for the Broncos, which is my favorite team, and won a Super Bowl. So I got to see my favorite athlete play for my favorite team. That doesn't always happen. So my favorite baseball player right now is probably Aaron Judge. As Pat, I'm also a Yankees fan. And my favorite basketball player is Steph Curry. Steph Curry is probably my favorite athlete, period. So I like Steph
threes. Fucking three baller.
So
Ruin
the game of
basketball.
So hopefully in the next year here, I'm going to be out of Ohio and I'm going to move to Virginia or somewhere down south, and I'm going to be away from the worst sports fans there are. So the Cleveland fans and the Buckeyes fans are the worst sports fans. Theo down there probably will disagree with me.
Philly's right up there for me. You know, when you go to a Phillies game and their team loses to my team and people want to like throw slushies at you as you're walking out, constitute kind of shitness right there. But yeah, okay.
So I'm going to turn
1A,
it over.
1B.
I'm going to turn it. Yeah, I also lived in New Hampshire, up in New England for a while, and the fans are also pretty terrible up there too. So I've lived in some really great cities for sports fans, let me tell you. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy now.
All right. Well, hello everybody. I am Jeremy. I might be last, but I'm definitely not least. I am one of the 4 co-hosts here. There is no real host. We're all the hosts. But as you can see, we are all very diverse. And just a little bit about myself. I actually grew up pretty much in Pennsylvania. I've lived in Pennsylvania pretty much my entire life, except for 2 years where I lived in Washington State. So that was a very long time ago, and I really don't remember much from that. I can tell you I was not a sports fan until I moved back here at the age of 10. So that's when I kind of fell in love with sports because I got into sports. And this guy right behind me here, Reggie White, is the reason I started playing football as a kid and played into, about 10th grade or so. He was definitely a big influence on me as a kid, made me want to play sports. I loved watching him play, the minister of defense. He was just an amazing player to watch. Like I've never seen, even to this day, I can't say I've seen a defensive end that is that dominant, even against 2 people at the same time. Unfortunately, like always happens, your favorite player doesn't always retire from your favorite team, which is the Eagles. He ended up going to, the Green Bay Packers. And
Fudge Packers.
That's my dad's favorite team, funny enough, because he grew up watching them. But, he did get his ring, which he definitely deserved, over his Hall of Fame career, definitely deserved to have that ring, even though it wasn't with the team that I wanted him to get with. As far as like basketball, probably my favorite basketball player to watch was Charles Barkley because I was a huge Sixers fan too. If it's a Phillies team, Philadelphia team, I liked them, even though I don't really watch hockey. That's never been a really big sport for me at any time. Sorry, Joe. Sorry, Theo. I enjoyed it when I watched it, but I just never really got into watching it all the time. But I do enjoy it when I watch it. But yeah, Charles Barkley was definitely my favorite player back in the day. Once again, he left to try and go around the ring, but he didn't have any success with that because he kept on running into Theo's favorite player from basketball, Michael Jordan, who I have to give mad props to because as a true basketball fan, if you can't give props to Michael Jordan, you should not probably be a basketball fan and just pretend that you don't exist.
There's some LeBron people out there that are like that.
There's some LeBron people out there. We're not going to talk about that right now. That's not going to be our topic of discussion today.
I'll need my blood pressure medicine for that episode.
But favorite player of football after Reggie White moved on and retired and eventually then passed away was Peyton Manning. Most of the players that I liked in any sport are always players that you didn't hear about contract disputes. You didn't hear about them whining and complaining about stuff. I liked guys that they go to work and they get what they get because they deserve what they get and they don't bitch about it and complain about it like a lot of superstars do now. And what I'm hearing with the MLB drives me absolutely nuts. So that's really, I'm a big fan of people that work hard, go hard, and then get paid for what they're worth, even if it is multi-million-dollar contracts, which seem absolutely insane to some people. But that is me. So back to Theo.
Hi. So we start our first segment of the episode. I think we should. So everyone, we're going to start off a little wrestling here right now. So what we wanted to talk about is all of us have been watching the Dark Side of the Ring episodes. Another good season 2. I'm looking forward to when season 3 happens. I've been reading that they're going to do it and whatnot. So just get the ball rolling after all this COVID-19 jazz, settles down, goes away. However you want to talk about that. But we're gonna like exclusively talk about the Owen Hart, episode, the tragedy that was Owen Hart and that accident, and things of that nature. Because technically WWF at that time was just trying to steal something that WCW was doing with Sting coming from the rafters and all that jazz. So let's put Owen Hart, because we have no idea what the fuck we're going to do with him, into that stupid gimmick. Let's put a mask on him. Let's start having him come from the rafters too, which for that gimmick was kind of stupid in the first place. It made no sense.
Nope.
But just the
Not at
fact that, you want to, the good old let's copy what the other guys are doing and let's see how it works for us. Well, unfortunately, this didn't work because you had some negligence that cost somebody their life. So it's just one of those things, because if you like Owen or if you didn't like Owen, if you like the Hart Foundation, didn't like it, it did make a difference, because Owen was definitely a different kind of breed of an athlete. Pretty much anything you wanted him to do in the ring, he can do. He was very athletic, very skilled. He knew what he was doing. Just not even watching the Dark Side of the Ring episode, watching some other stuff I've watched on him and on YouTube and some other things of that nature of other people from Canada and those territories just talk openly and how good he was as a wrestling technician, even before he was even taught how to wrestle. He just picked everything up so quick in regards to that.
He was very underappreciated, I think. He was very underappreciated. I don't think that a lot of people realized how special he was, and they did kind of talk about it in the Dark Side of the Ring that if he had lived a little bit longer, WWF had guys coming like Eddie Guerrero and Edge and guys that were going to come that probably would have made him, he would have probably, capitalized on that. And he probably would have went from that middle tier to the superstar tier if he would have got to work with those guys, I think. So
undoubtedly.
Yeah. Multiple reigns as a champion. And just, you would have seen a lot of like top tier matches. I mean, you put him with Kurt Angle or Eddie Guerrero, the way those two guys work with Owen Hart, that was some spectacular matches right there.
The Owen Hart Brett match from WrestleMania is still like talked about. Like that's still a match that people like go back and say was, one of the better matches. Like, greatest match ever is a tagline getting thrown around currently. So that's one of them that people talk about. Like, and that's one that comes up in conversation. So for those two put on a really good match. So
yeah. Well, you got to look at it from this point when you're talking about Owen Hart and Bret Hart. One, they both trained in the same place in the dungeon at their home with their dad Stu, and on top of that, you had Bret, who was probably the most technically sound wrestler that we've ever seen in our lifetime, and then you had Owen Hart, who was like the super athletic, version of Bret Hart. Like he was technically sound, but he was like super athletic compared to Bret, and Bret with that was athletic to boot too. So you got brothers working together that know how to wrestle. They, both are technically sound, one more than the other. One's really athletic. They're going to know how to tell a story in the ring, and they're going to know how to wrestle in the ring, which is something that a lot of us probably agree on is really kind of lost in today's wrestling. And that's what made their match so great, is what they were able to do between the wrestling, the storytelling, everything that went on in that match.
Yeah, brother versus brother. I mean, the other thing too with Owen, I don't think they knew what to do with him because he was a little ahead of the curve, a little ahead of his time with his athleticism and the things he can do in the ring. And they really didn't, besides Bret, they didn't really have a lot of guys to really put with him in the ring to have good matches and great storylines to begin with. I mean, unless you go back and like watch his whole career, like everything kind of like people remember and centers around like the Hart Foundation and his brother Bret. Like all the other little storylines he has is kind of like, oh, I kind of remember, but not really. It's like everything that was like successful for him was with the Hart Foundation, going against his brother, things like that. All the other little feuds, kind of, sort of, but no one really remembers a lot of that stuff, unfortunately, because they didn't have anybody to work with them.
Pat, what's your take on this, Pat?
I mean, it's hard to add to what you guys have already said. But, it's interesting because, unfortunately, I didn't watch as much of Owen Hart when he was alive as I should have. The reason being is that, I just didn't really watch a lot of WWF after Hulk Hogan left in 1993. I would say probably after WrestleMania 10 in 94, I almost totally switched off WWF with like a few exceptions here and there. So, he has that great match with Bret at WrestleMania 10, and then it seemed like, he feuded with Bret, like for the rest of that year, and it kind of carried on over into the next year in 95. But then, like you kind of said, it seemed like they really didn't know exactly what they were doing with him. Like, they couldn't come up with like a good program for him. It was like, they were like, who were the top guys at that point other than his brother? It was like Shawn Michaels and Diesel and Razor Ramon.
And Undertaker.
And Undertaker. And it was like, for whatever reason, they just didn't seem to want to match him up against any of those guys, consistently. So, like, they put him into the tag team with Yokozuna, and Cornette kind of became his de facto manager then because of that. And then, as 95 wore on, well, then they didn't have anything to do with British Bulldog, so they turned the Bulldog heel. And so now Owen and Davey Boy are teaming up because they're brothers-in-law, but it's also still kind of like, while they weren't ever really so much wrestling against Bret at that point, it was still kind of like, well, they're teaming up because they're both mad at Bret,
Yeah.
And then they did finally put him with Michaels. I remember they did that whole angle where, like, after they turned Michaels' face, Owen like knocked him out with the enziguri, and they made it look like, like Michaels had suffered like a huge concussion, and that he was like, it was dangerous for him to ever get back in the ring again. But it seems like there was never a payoff for Owen for that. It was just all about building Michaels up for the Iron Man match at WrestleMania 12. And so it really felt like Owen didn't really have a lot of good stuff to do again until Bret turned heel, and then they reformed like what I called the Super Hart Foundation, in 1997.
The Canada Forever Great Hart Foundation.
Right. They really might have, in so many ways, because of, of course, the way that they booked it, and then, the whole Canadian Stampede pay-per-view. It's like they might as well have called it Team Canada, but then he got to do some good things, with Austin and with Triple H. But then, again, like after the screw job, it really felt like he kind of became, like a second thought again. It's like he could have been so hot after the screw job because he stayed. And it seemed like, I think that he had a match with Triple H, I think it was at WrestleMania 14, where Austin won the title and everything. But they didn't really ever seem to follow through with it. It's like, I don't know if they felt like the audience didn't like fully get behind him or whatever, but it just seems like they just kind of let him go, like, eh. And then they turn him heel again, and so it just felt like it never really was clicking the way it should have. And I really feel like they were, and if I say they, I mean like, the behind the scenes stuff, the creative, whatever, it really feels like they weren't utilizing him as well as they could have. It almost really felt like if he had been in WCW during all those years, yeah, he may have been hitting the ceiling too that like all the cruiserweight guys were hitting in those years. But he might have been having better matches, and he may have been having better storylines too, for all we know. I don't know, but the cruiserweight division was getting kind of by the time of like the screw job, so I don't know how he would have fit in if he had been able to leave. But it just did seem like they felt Owen had a ceiling, and they just really never let him through. It's like other than the match with Bret at SummerSlam '94, I really can't remember too many times that he ever wrestled for the WWF Championship. And that just like he might have wrestled against Michaels after Michaels won it there. I really don't remember though. But it just feels like that was like a huge missed opportunity in a lot of ways. Even if you're not going to put the title on him, he could have gotten a great match out of almost anybody. It's like he could have he could have had a great match with Steve Austin in '98, obviously, but I mean after the pile drive botch at '97 SummerSlam, now Austin may not have wanted to work with him. I know Austin always expressed hard feelings, which I understand. Owen totally botched that move, but it just feels like at the end, Owen's career to me is, it was I think it was great for what it was. I mean, he won a lot of titles.
And the Slammies.
Yeah, right. That's right. You can't forget the Slammy.
The two-time Slammy.
The two-time Slammy award winning. But it just feels like again that there was so much more that could have been there. And again, like they indicated on the special, if he hadn't died when he did, maybe there would have been. He was only 34 when he died. I mean, you look at some of the guys, how late they're going now. Surely, again, that they would have, when guys like Kurt Angle and Chris Jericho and the Radicals and Edge and Christian and the Hardy and all those guys and Rob Van Dam, eventually too, all those types of guys start coming into the company over the span of like 99 to 01. He could have probably had a really good second act if, of course, they just figured out what to do with him creatively.
So let me interrupt. I got to interrupt for something real quick.
Okay.
I got a public service announcement for all our fans watching. Two things. One, we want to hear your comments on the Dark Side of the Ring. We want to know what you guys think about the whole Owen Hart Dark Side of the Ring episode. So we want you guys to drop a comment. Go to YouTube. Four Guys Roundtable Show is the name of our YouTube channel. Go there, drop a comment on this video when you have a chance. Also, you got to stay tuned until the end because we are going to have our Mount Rushmore. We're not going to tell you what it is, but it's going to be the Mount Rushmore of something based on today's episode that you're watching or listening to, wherever you're getting this feed from. All right, go ahead, AJ.
Okay, so if Owen would have not died, we may have gotten to see Owen fight Shawn Michaels again when Michaels came back, and that was a different iteration of Michaels, and I feel like something special would have happened then. I know me and Pat, there's differences with Michaels because Michaels was a dick. His first stint in WWE was a dick. It was a different version of him the second time around, and I feel like if we would have gotten to see those two then, that probably would have been something special because I think Owen was heading in that direction. And Michaels, he became that guy when he came back again that had great matches with everybody. I mean, who didn't he have a good match with after he came back? So, it would have been cool to see Owen and Michaels again, in that situation, I think, because I think Owen was one of the guys that could keep up with Michaels athletically and stuff, and WWE didn't have a ton of guys that could keep up with him athletically, I don't think. So, when Michaels retired, I still thought he was better than half the guys on the rosters.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. That is that's very true.
The one thing about the Owen Hart thing for me is I was I think 23 maybe when it happened. I remember watching Over the Edge when it happened, and I was a kid still, I wasn't really an adult. As an adult looking back, WWE should not have kept that pay-per-view going. That was a terrible idea.
Ridiculous.
It was looking back on it now, I can't believe that they did that. His widow said that was essentially a crime scene. So he dies and they just push him out of the ring like a pile of crap and wrestle on the mat where there's blood and everything. It was a terrible idea. I can't believe that they did that. It's one of the worst things I think Vince has done in the whole time was continuing that pay-per-view after he died.
Well, you can tell it's a clusterfuck, and it's the most fucked up thing that's happening because during that Dark Side of the Ring, you have JR, and he's he didn't even know how to talk. He's told, keep going with the show, keep the show going. The show must go on. And he's even in his interview, he's we should have stopped the show.
Yeah, he's so right.
And this is one of the announcers of the show.
He said that was the worst moment of his career when he had to announce that Owen Hart died. Here, you have 10 seconds to figure out what you're going to say. Have fun with this.
Yeah, just put it all on here. Just unbelievable.
It's going back to something that Theo, I think, had said at the top of this discussion. It was just so senseless, and it was so stupid, and it was so unnecessary. They were doing something that was basically, again, like you said, it was really, and I believe they said this on the episode. It was to really just parody and make fun
100%
of what WCW had been doing for over 2 years at that point with Sting, with the rappelling down from the ceiling and everything. And it's kind of funny because there's always, I think, been this thing in wrestling, at least during the Monday Night War era. Maybe not so much during the 80s territory era, because back then you never acknowledged anybody outside of your own organization. But it seemed like during the Monday Night War era, it seems like there would always be hints and allusions going back and forth between the two. I mean, of course, you had all the billionaire Ted shit,
the Nacho Man,
the huckster and the Nacho Man, and Scheme G. And then you had, of course, on Nitro you had Bischoff giving away the results of taped laws, and then obviously the NWO, of course, at first, is making you think, wait a minute, is this an actual invasion? I remember that's what I thought when I first saw Scott Hall walk out. But
me too.
It always seemed like there should have always been this thing, like when you're on top, like when you're the number one company and in a two company system, and I'm not meaning to disparage just an ECW, but come on, it was always a two-way battle.
So true.
You can't. It's very true.
But it seems to me like if you're number one, you shouldn't care about what number two is doing. Like, you shouldn't acknowledge them. So WWE didn't, or WWF at the time still, of course, didn't really do that. I mean, doing the billionaire Ted stuff and everything was stupid because they were still beating WCW at that time. Mm-hmm. Bischoff giving away the results of Raw made sense because Nitro was trying to establish themselves and establish an identity. So it's like, I get why they were doing that. They were taking pot shots at the one that's ahead of them. But here we are in May of '99, though, when this is going on. It's not, the war's not over, but it's really at the point where it's almost over, because I think when WCW really stopped being competitive was a couple months, before that. And I think it was from early '99 on where WWF just continually stomped WCW into non-existence 2 years later. But so my whole point is, why are you even bothering parodying something if the company that you're now once again stomping in have turned back into the number two company? Was it spite? Was it just trying to say, oh, don't watch them because they're still doing this stuff after 2 years and it's ridiculous now? But
come on, Pat. Darth Pat, let's be honest. We know Vince McMahon is a spiteful bastard. All right. Look at some of the stuff he's done recently.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, you can see that with some of the other shit that he's done over the year, like that JR skit, with the, pulling
barbecue sauce.
Well, pulling all the stuff out of his ass, but it's like, again, did Vince come up with that spot? Because that's the thing that I think is still a bit of a mystery to this day. Nobody's come right out and said, oh, hey, that was my idea. Understandably, why? I mean, a lot of
I wouldn't want to admit it either if it was my idea. Fuck.
Yeah. I
death threats and shit.
I obviously wanted. I mean, a lot of people, I think, have wanted to point the finger at Vince Russo because, he was more or less the head writer at the time and everything. And maybe it was a Russo idea. It certainly kind of fits with other shit that we saw Russo do.
And it's the only thing that Russo won't take credit for while he was there at WWF.
And we definitely know that Vince Russo will do something just to spite somebody. The brawl for all, so.
Yeah, so I mean, that's what the real tragedy is of it, is that, again, it didn't have to happen. It didn't need to be done. Again, he was in the mid card at the time. He was in a mid card feud. It's like, yes, he was wrestling for and I believe was supposed to win the Intercontinental title that night. But again, it's like, this isn't your main thing. Why are you putting so much effort into something? It's like, really, what's really the payoff here? I mean, it's I don't think there was one.
Zero payoff for any of that stuff. Yeah. Zero.
None. And then like you guys said, I mean, to have the show continue, it's like, on one hand, okay, I can understand why Vince wants to continue the show. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that. The fact, though, that
money.
that's, I mean, that's one thing, but it's like these people were all witnesses to it. The people who were inside the arena. I mean, the people watching at home didn't really know what was going on other than what they were being told from JR. But the people who were inside the ring witnessed it. Now, I've never actually watched that show. I will be the first to admit that I never watched that show. I've never put it on the network or anything. I know I've read when I've read like reviews of it at the time, everybody to a T pretty much says that afterwards the crowd was dead. Like, the main event of that night was Undertaker beating Stone Cold for the title, and nobody cared.
No. Don't give a shit about any other match after that.
Right.
And
you
why
had
would
a title change?
It's like legit
with
crickets.
Austin, like, the super babyface losing, but nobody gave a shit because they witnessed a guy die, for Christ's sake. So the fact that Vince and nobody else around him had the sense to go, shit, we need to stop this, because nobody's going to even be into the show. If we have to give refunds, oh, well, we have to give refunds. But like Martha said on the documentary as well, where the hell were the police?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Why did the police just come in and say, you just had somebody fall 60, 80, whatever the hell, however many feet it was to his death. If this is now a crime scene, we have to investigate. What's Vince going to do? Is he going to bribe the cops? I mean, he probably would have tried.
I could have. Like, guys, I have a couple hundreds here. Let's wait till after the show, please.
Hey, I mean, if you watch the Jimmy Snuka episode from this season of Dark Side of the Ring, there was the allegation that he did something there, and of course that was right here in our neck of the woods. For me and Jeremy, where we live.
Valley.
Yes. It's a senseless tragedy that, again, didn't need to happen. And here's the kind of ironic thing. Like, I think I said I've always went through like kind of cycles with watching. Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, I wasn't really watching, I don't think, either show for whatever reason. I think my interest had just taken me elsewhere. I mean, that was my senior year of high school, so I was probably more concerned with other things. But I remember my dad coming up into my room that night and saying, Owen Hart died tonight at the pay-per-view. And I was just like, I didn't know what to say. And I actually watched Raw the next night. Mm-hmm. And that kind of sort of actually ended up getting me a little bit interested in WWF again at the time. It took until I got to college later that fall and everything to really kind of start watching them again regularly. But I find that kind of chillingly ironic that it took Owen's death for me to turn WWF on again. Just kind of a weird coincidence, but I think it was mostly I just wanted to see what they were going to do to honor Owen's life. And the problem is, of course, that I think that was a truly special night of Raw the following night, mm-hmm. But also one of those things that you'll never hear them talk about anymore, and that's because they really can't do anything to promote him anymore in any way, shape, or form, which I think should be the next thing we talk about, which is the current state of things between the organization and Martha.
Yes, and before we get to that, real quick, remember, the end of our show, people, the end of our show is all about the Mount Rushmore. We're going to release the first Mount Rushmore on this episode, so please stay tuned until the very end. You do not want to miss it. It's going to be great. So, as Pat was saying, current state of Owen Hart. It's nuts. Like, and she has every right to be mad. I think it's absolutely fucked up that when she sued the WWF at that point in time, that her family, the Hart family, and all the, everybody that was associated with the Hart family was pretty much against her and like trying to sabotage her whole case. And because they didn't want to mess up their bread being buttered by, and did any of them ever come out of it besides Davey Boy Smith's son? I don't know of any Harts that have wrestled since Owen Harts besides Davey Boy Smith and, well, Natalia. I'm sorry, Natalia is the one exception. and Davey Boy Smith's son didn't last very long in WWE, from what I can remember. It was pretty short lived.
No,
So
that was pretty sad, like watching that and seeing like, Owen's family members go into her house and stealing documentation and stealing shit from her so she didn't have it for the lawyers and stuff like that. It's like, they were so afraid. It seemed like they were so afraid of Vince McMahon, and they were afraid of losing. Like, we don't want to piss him off because he pays us good money. We're the Owen family, the Owen Hart, they're the Hart family. Sorry, and if we go anywhere else, we're gonna get paid X amount of dollars. But if we go to WWF, Vince is like, oh, he's going to give us more money. We can do jobber shit. He's going to pay us good to be a jobber, but it's just kind of shitty
Jobbers.
for like, I mean, listen, all of his other brothers were legit jobbers. That's all. That's besides the two of them, all they did was fucking jobbers. Even the Survivor Series where it was like the Hart family against, I remember who the fuck they wrestled against.
Oh, I remember that. That was a travesty.
Yeah, it's just sad to see that happen. Like, what influence? I don't want to assume things, but what influence did Vince have on those brothers? Where those family members had to go to her house, and steal shit for her case against WWF. This is kind of like, and just seeing it, and just seeing like the evidence she had of the hook that he was wearing. That hook was a piece of shit. There's no way you're putting that type of hook on a guy.
They cut corners. They went cheap. So.
It should have been a cantilever. Like screw thing that guys use for climbing rocks and stuff and rappelling. Like that was not what they used.
and they're so worried about like how he looked, but yet even Sting, when he was
2 seconds,
like he just it looked bulky. You see him coming down from the rafters. He has big jacket on, so who cares about the bulkiness? But like he would take it off. It'd take him a little bit, but he wanted to make sure when he's fucking being propelled that he's not going to fucking fall to his death and shit.
Really, it's like two or 3 seconds you're talking about. It's not like you're talking about a minute. Like if it was 5 minutes, but it was like seconds. Like they went cheap for seconds.
Well,
it made no sense.
Well, that was the whole thing again, because he was doing the Blue Blazer gimmick again, but instead of playing it more or less straight the way they did the first time he did the Blue Blazer back in, it was like 88, 89, he was doing it like in a parodic manner, which is fine, because the Blue Blazer is not going to work as a gimmick in 1999, in the middle of like the Jerry Springer reality era, the Attitude Era of wrestling,
But the 80s gimmick in the 90s, late 90s at that.
Right. Again, it's like they did this. They wanted it to do this like a whole quick release thing, so he'd be taking a pratfall out of the thing, and that is really how you know that. I'm hesitant to use the word negligence here, but it was, because I don't really know what other word you can't use, because
you're right, Pat.
You could say, well, the idea to have to do the pratfall, there's some value in that, and it's like, yeah, okay. But in order for him to be able to do this pratfall coming down from the thing, he's got to do it in such a way that, again, they said, with how little pressure that thing had to have applied to it, I say you're risking his life from the start then. If he didn't have a way to be able to do that safely, then it wasn't worth doing it. So that's the problem there. And then, when you talk about the Hart family and everything, like you mentioned the 93 Survivor Series match. Yeah, it was Bruce and Keith Hart. And Bruce Hart was the one who was originally supposed to get Owen's spot. Like, he was supposed to be the brother to turn on Bret. But Bret convinced Vince to make it Owen. So that was always something that I found interesting. That was kind of shows you maybe how little Vince thought of Owen at the time. Don't know.
They were both jobbers. Those other two were jobbers, both of them. They weren't anything.
Well, yeah, Bruce Hart, if you read Bret Hart's book, he kind of went after his brother Bruce like a few times, I think, for overcomplicating things or having like a higher value from something. Like Keith Hart, I think, was basically more or less retired at that point. Like, he had wrestled back in Stampede, but I don't think he was really intending to be a full-time wrestler again in '93. But again, the family like stealing her shit and everything, like her legal documents. At the time when it happened, Davey Boy and Neidhart were both unemployed. Like, WCW had even both chewed them up and spit them out after they came over with Bret, more or less, after the screw job by that point. And it was like almost immediately, I believe, again, this was all in like Bret's book. they're like, immediately cutting interviews with television outlets saying, "Oh, it was just an accident. It was nobody's fault." Blah blah blah. And that infuriated Brett
Yeah.
because he's saying like, Owen's body isn't cold, and you're angling to get jobs again with Vince, and you're really pissing me off. It kind of felt like Brett was the only one who at least seemingly to a point, and I have not read Martha Hart's book. It's probably something I should probably check out. But it seems like at the time Brett was the only one who was really standing by her. And then this is something that unfortunately they didn't get into in the documentary, and there's been some stuff that kind of went online when it came out. Something happened between Martha and Brett, and we don't really know what for sure. Martha seemed to say that Brett was upset that when she got her settlement, it didn't include Brett getting like the rights to use any WWE footage. And Brett came out with a statement saying that was not the case, but he refused to comment any further, which unfortunately just kind of leaves you with a big mystery. But it is very sad that the Hart, some of the Hart family, whoever it was, whether it was Jim Neidhart's wife or Davey Boy Smith's wife, Diana, whoever the hell it was, it doesn't matter who it was. But the fact that they did that to this woman is really terrible, because you really alienated her. And I guess maybe it was a sense because Owen was the youngest brother, and because Martha, meaning she was never really into wrestling the way that everybody else in the family basically was, that they felt like she was an outsider. And it's like, I mean, it's really kind of heartbreaking. And
yeah,
you get that sense. And what I was really also happy to see the documentary do was that they did talk to his children.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it was great to see that despite growing up without a father, they look like they're pretty successful, well-adjusted people.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine what that would be like, especially his daughter. She was what, like 3 at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just horrible. But I remember reading several years ago. Unfortunately, I can't remember like what website it was on and who it was that was being interviewed, but they were being asked about Owen Hart, and they were being asked about Owen's son, Oj. And whoever it was being interviewed was expressing like dismay, I guess, that Martha wants nothing to do with wrestling business, because they were saying like, oh, well, Oj should be around the boys and everything. And I just, especially after watching the documentary, why should Oj be around the boys? Look, it wasn't obviously any wrestler that killed Owen,
Right.
but it's like, why should Oj give a shit about the wrestling business?
Well, and I
just thought that was a dumbass comment, and especially after watching the documentary, it's like, dude, if Oj wants to come to wrestling shows, he will. Let him be himself.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool, and I think we can all agree on this point, is that his wife Martha, his kids Oj, and I can't remember his daughter's name. What was it?
Athena.
I think it's really cool that they have put their foot down. They own all the rights to Owens, all his likelihoods and all that stuff. And they put their foot down and said WWE doesn't get any of his shit. He's not going to the Hall of Fame. His kids don't want him in the Hall of Fame because they don't want the WWE and Vince McMahon to be able to glorify the tragedy that is his death on their watch.
I agree with that too.
And I think that's absolutely awesome.
I do too.
Because why should WWE? I mean, we all have watched WWE. We're all big wrestling fans. Sometimes we fall off the boat, like I have recently, like Darth Pat has. But ultimately, we are all wrestling fans, and I don't see the right of the WWE and Vince McMahon to be able to put Owen Hart out there. We all know how great of a wrestler he was. I think we can all agree that he had some pretty good gimmicks that he created, not that the WWE created for him. When they allowed him to be himself. And I think any wrestling fan can take that away as a memory and say he is a Hall of Famer, even if he's never in the Hall of Fame.
Agreed.
I agree with that. I mean, I will tell you, I was always firmly in the, oh, come on, just let him go in the Hall of Fame camp, because I felt like he belongs, he's deserving. and it would be a nice moment for the fans. After watching that documentary, I'll never say that again. Absolutely.
Me neither.
And the reason being is that we're fans, yes. That's all we are. We're just fans. We don't have any rights to any of these people beyond being their fans. We don't have ownership of them. We can bitch about what they do inside the ring or this or that, but you know what? They don't owe us anything. And again, because like she even said, there is no actual like physical Hall of Fame. I mean, maybe she kind of almost implied that maybe she'd have a different attitude, like if there was like an actual real physical Hall of Fame that you could go visit. I kind of doubt it though, but it sounds like maybe she's saying that. But again, yeah, we all went to WrestleMania last year, and we were in the pro shop at MetLife Stadium. And one of the items they had was like like the Hall of Fame shirt, and they had like the pictures of all the people who were being inducted into the Hall of Fame on it. So obviously, that I'm sure that's got to be something then that they do every year. Having only been to one WrestleMania since
it is.
I would think so.
They do.
Right. So if he were to go into the Hall of Fame, they'd want to put his face on the shirt. So again, they'd be profiting off of it. They profit. They, like you said, they profit off of it just by inducting him, because they can sell tickets to the event just by saying, "Hey, Owen Hart's one of the guys that's being inducted." They can sell, the program to, USA to broadcast whatever portion of it on USA, on the network, by saying Owen Hart's being inducted. Yeah. So she's got every right to say no effing way. And the fact that really the fact that really cinched it though for me too, to have that to really change my mind, is the fact that Oj was so adamant about it too.
Oh yeah, you could tell he definitely very much is.
Yeah, because you could always maybe think, well, maybe there's a possibility that maybe his kids will want and they'll convince their mother to change their mind, blah blah blah. But I think he was had stronger feelings about it than Martha
she
did.
does. Yeah.
And so if that's the case, then yeah, it's like, let them run that foundation, which sounds like it does a lot of great stuff. And sorry fans, you're gonna have to deal without Owen Hart in the Hall and being listed in the Hall of Fame. If you want to call him a famer, go right ahead, because we all know that he was. But you're just gonna have to deal without like some kind of like ceremony putting him into it.
Yeah. And it's the only right thing. It's the right thing to do is not do it. All right, real quick, fans, don't forget, in a couple minutes comes the Mount Rushmore portion of our show, which is going to essentially be the end of our show this week. Will be the Mount Rushmore. Please stay tuned. Only a couple minutes away. Theo, do we want to do final thoughts now on the dark side of the ring, Owen Hart?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So just for like my take of it, I mean, it's pretty simple. I like what Vice is doing with the Dark Side of the Ring series. I'm glad Jericho has, a part of it as well. We see the positive sides of pro wrestling. It's good, and we see negative sides, but I like how in depth they go with some of these situations, because as fans we read the dirt sheets, and half the time the dirt sheets are what they are. It's fucking dirt sheets. It's shit. It's not even half of it's not even true. 3/4 of it's not even fucking true.
It's the shit sheets.
It's the shit sheets. It legitimately is. So it's good, because Vice. First of all, I like Vice in general, because I feel that they do a lot of good programming for things like this. And to have somebody in the wrestling business that cares like Jericho does, it's good to have. He has a hand in it. Just like final thought, it's just like, listen, we all know he's a Hall of Famer. He's never going to be in the WWE Hall of Fame. But it doesn't matter at this point anymore. His wife and kid have all the say and everything, and I'm for them. My only thing is, like, if I was Martha, the only way I would let him into the WWE Hall of Fame is like they have that foundation that they do. I would be like,
Mhm.
you have to give me every single cent of every single fucking piece of merchandise that has his fucking name or likeness on it. Anything, if you sell $1 billion of his shit, that comes to me and goes right to my foundation to do what I do for that. And even like if they promote it on TV, it's like, hey, motherfucker, give me 15% of what you just made on that fucking TV commercial, because that's going right towards the foundation too. But that's just me being a little greedy and being an asshole, being a prick towards Vince in regards to that. But with that being said, no, it's just a tragic thing for somebody who had to pass away way too early in his career. Go for it, guys.
I'm good. I said what I needed to say. So I mean, I like that series too because WWE doesn't have any hand in it. They can't, you know, say,
Manipulate.
oh, you're gonna put this on. You can't put this on. Like I like the fact it's just like I tell everybody that my favorite book is the Bret Hart book because WWE had nothing to do with that. They didn't say this passes the test. You can put this in the book. He wrote that completely without their bidding essentially. So I like that show just because it has no ties to WWE. So we get what's maybe the truth, I think, in some stuff. So
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
I didn't really like Owen Hart as a wrestler, but I appreciated him, and it sounds like he was a really good person backstage. It sounds like he was a prankster, and that was like the thing everybody always talks about with him is that he was always ribbing people and always pulling pranks backstage. So it sounds like that was actually the best part of him was the backstage version of him, like. Jarrett, The Rock, all these people have said over and over how funny he was and how his charisma. It wasn't always on the TV. I think a lot of it was backstage. I think we never got to see most of it. So
True. And just when you thought, fans, that AJ Nitro, you'll find out, talks a lot, like he has diarrhea of the mouth sometimes. We thought he wasn't going to say anything, but still had something to say, which is on par for AJ.
He does talk a lot from time to time. I mean, Pat
all the
talked
time
tonight. That's just
yeah,
insane.
Pat talked the most tonight. So
Yes, Darth Pat.
That's a rarity.
I felt like I've kind of been talking a little too much, but yeah.
I mean, with
There's
that poster hanging from the top of your ceiling behind you, I mean, you might have been really excited tonight to actually talk to everybody. So, I mean, you're good. Let's keep it going, buddy.
Well, when it comes to wrestling, for whatever reason, I seem to be more interested in the history because like I've recently read like the Nitro book, the Death of WCW book, and I also read the Death of the Territories book recently. So it's just it's really just kind of interesting to see like the history of the business and everything. But as far as a final thought, this is something that wasn't in the documentary itself, but came out as the documentary was airing several weeks ago. Is the inability of WWE to just, as they say, take the L, because Jerry McDevitt, who's a longtime WWE lawyer, and I'm sure he's great at what he does, because his job is to represent that company.
Mm-hmm.
The comments that he made following some things that Martha, I guess, had said, I believe it was on Jericho's podcast, just really show a complete lack of tact and just a callousness that is really hard to believe, to be honest. It's, I mean, Martha had not some very nice things to say about Bret, as far as why they don't have a relationship. Bret gave like a really small statement, but basically didn't want to elaborate on it, didn't want to comment on it, didn't go and portray himself or Martha in a negative light, took the high road. Jerry McDevitt comes out with this long ass winded statement accusing her of accusing her of trying to, promise part of the settlement to, Owen's siblings, which he claims is illegal. I don't know the law. I have no clue. But when he claimed that Martha was not interested in finding out what really happened that night, there's only one way you could ever respond to somebody who says that to a widow. Fuck you. I mean,
just admit you're wrong. You're allowed to be wrong. Like it would have been easier if they would have just taken the L.
Right. How fucking much of a piece of shit do you have to be to fucking say that? Even 21 years later, it's like, Jesus Christ. So just, I mean, that should tell you a lot, unfortunately, about, Jerry McDevitt and what he does. And I understand he's been great at some of these live shows with Bruce Pritchard over the years, but when he made like an appearance or two, but it's like, wow, that's just, no, don't do that. Just shut up. Take, maybe just take the high road. Just decline comment. I mean, if you just decline comment, nobody's going to think any differently of you, because you're not going to come out of this looking good. Everybody blames you for it as it is. So if you're going to respond to comments like that, you're going to do one of two things. You can make no comment and nobody will have changed their opinion about you, or you can say something that's going to make them lower your opinion of you, and that's exactly what he did. So, it's sad again that even after all these years and paying out a settlement, they basically are still acting like it was not their fault, and that's just not right.
Like Schnitzky, it wasn't my fault.
That's one of the few stars I've ever gotten to meet in person, man. So,
all right. So my final thoughts. Like Theo, I absolutely love the Dark Side of the Ring series. I think it's great, and I've watched every single one of them, even about people I had no idea who the hell they were. So I actually thoroughly enjoy it. Owen Harts is probably my favorite next to Jimmy Snuka's, just because Jimmy Snuka's was so close to home for me. But yeah, I thought it was great. There was one thing I wish they would have showed some footage of, just because I really enjoyed this character that Owen Hart did, and that was the Nugget character when he was part of Nation of Domination. He had the caution tape suit.
Yeah.
Like, it was a cheesy gimmick, but it was just funny to hear him say, "I'm not a Nugget." Like almost every time on TV, it just made me laugh. Because that's when I had gotten back into wrestling, because The Rock and Stone Cold were so huge, and being a big Rock mark that I am for wrestling. So yeah, I love it. I think there was some really good stuff in that particular documentary that just brings light to a subject that we know WWE is never going to talk about, because they don't ever want to shed a negative light on themselves. Hence why you don't ever hear about Chris Benoit, who is AJ's favorite wrestler of all time. Oh, sorry, just kidding, AJ. We know you absolutely despise that guy. But yeah, so I think it's great. So that brings us to our end of our show, and all our fans that have been waiting for the very end. We are now to the Mount Rushmore, and what this Mount Rushmore is going to be. It's the very first Mount Rushmore, so I'm super excited about it. But it is all about wrestlers whose careers ended too early due to their passing. So we all have one person that we're going to add to the Mount Rushmore. Since it's 4 heads, we got 4 guys. We're each going to take somebody that we believe career ended way too soon due to their passing. And we're going to kick it off with Darth Pat.
Well, this is a topic where unfortunately we could probably do about 6 or 7 Mount Rushmores.
True.
True.
We're only doing one.
Yeah, it's nature of the business, unfortunately, as we all know. I went back and forth with like a lot of guys who I could think of. There's David Von Erich, there's Gino Hernandez, but for both guys who were featured in season 1 of Dark Side of the Ring. But for both of those guys, they both passed before I really became a wrestling fan, and I never got to see them wrestle, while they were alive or anything. The guy I'm picking, though, is also a guy who, believe it or not, I actually did not see wrestle that much while he was alive. And that is the one and only Brian Pillman.
Nice.
The reason for that is that when he was first making an impact in WCW, like, late 80s into the early 90s there, I think we had like the single worst cable TV provider in the world, because we didn't get TBS. I always remember seeing, like looking through TV Guide and seeing like what TBS was showing and saying, yeah, they show a lot of good shows. Why the hell do I not see TBS? So the only way I knew about WCW was through buying like the wrestling magazines in the stores and everything. And so Pillman was was somebody who was always talked off about. And I saw like highlights, sometimes here and there. And so, dude, the high flying style, you're going to instantly get attracted to that and everything. And I remember seeing the magazine like when he first turned heel, where he was saying like, it was one of the wrestling mags, and it said, Brian Pillman shocks the world, tells fans they can go to hell. And even though I never really watched him regularly, I remember looking at it and just being shocked, because it was like, I thought this was the type of guy who would just never turn heel, but I should have known better because of Shawn Michaels a few months before that. But so Pillman, obviously he was a tremendous innovator. With all the high flying moves, the classic matches with Jushin Liger. But then, he had, I guess you could almost say, like a transition in his career where he did the loose cannon character. And to me, the loose cannon character, I think, was really one of the most revolutionary, ahead of its time characters that's ever been there. Like, it's like,
he's got a gun.
Yeah, that's like, but the way he acted, like,
that was a crazy segment too.
The way that he acted crazy, that he could, like, kind of like go from one to another like the drop of a hat. When I briefly wrote in a column for a wrestling website, and I reviewed the DVD that WWE put out about Pillman, I said he was really like the closest thing ever that wrestling had had to the Joker, because he was completely unpredictable. He did and said whatever he wanted. He didn't care who he pissed off. He was willing to mess with anybody. The whole, I respect you, Booker Man thing with Kevin Sullivan. And so his life, of course, very tragic. He has that horrible car accident, which pretty much negated all his high flying moves. Like, he was never going to be able to be the high flyer again after that, because they had to fuse his ankle.
Mm-hmm.
And then, look, I'm not going to say he was doing like recreational drugs, but he was probably doing like painkillers and shit.
Which a lot of them were doing at that time. I mean, It is what it is to get through their schedule.
Right. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if somebody said, "Oh yeah, he was a coke addict," And I'm not disparaging his character. I don't care if he did, but like everybody else, he was probably doing the painkillers, and I think that's probably what killed him. So, and again, when he died, it's like he was in that program again. He was in the Hart Foundation. He was doing that program with Goldust. It was probably gonna have a good payoff, but again, it would have been really, really interesting to see where he was going to continue to take that character, especially as they were like not quite into the Attitude Era when he passed away in 1997. They were just about there. They could have done so much more with that in the actual Attitude Era, that it's really a shame that we didn't get to see it. I'm happy to see that his son's like wrestling now, and supposedly is up and coming. I haven't seen him, but hey, if he inherited any of his father's skills, that'd be awesome. But Flying Brian to me is he's kind of, to me, I think he was almost like the original wrestling tragedy for me, even more so than like the Von Erichs, or like anybody else who died prematurely, like Dino Bravo, or like anybody like that, because he was the first guy that I can really remember who was actively wrestling, and then he just was not there anymore. So,
yeah. All right, Theo, who was your head for Mount Rushmore?
So my guy is growing up when I started watching wrestling, back in the 80s, because I'm fucking old as shit. All the guys that were
we're all old except
I'm
for Pat.
I'm the second oldest here in this group, I think, so I'm allowed to call myself old as shit.
Yes, you are, sir.
God damn it.
That's why he's wearing a hat, folks, is to hide the gray.
Just recently had a birthday too, even.
Okay, slow your rolls with that. I'm wearing my hat because it's the time of night we're doing this. I'm not having a great hair day, so I'm just putting a little hat on. I mean, I did shave for you guys. See, I got rid of the stubble on my cheeks here and underneath, so I shaved to make myself look more presentable tonight.
I've got in almost 3 months. I did not make myself presentable for you.
I mean, I have more hair in my head and in my face than the three of you guys have all together right now. Okay. I could shave my beard off and give it to Jeremy over here, and it'd be like he could part it on one side, and get a little fancy haircut going on there.
I like my hair, thank you, and fuck off.
Okay. So I picked Kerry Von Erich. Like his wrestling, the type of guy he was, his gimmick. It was just different. We all know Vince, like the big muscular, like bodybuilding dudes, but that was kind of like those type of guys back in the 80s. And there was something different about him from kind of being from the South, being left-handed. I don't know. It was just something really different about him that caught my eye. And growing up, you know, before I went from living in Chicago to moving to Pennsylvania, I used to, talk to my cousin a lot, and she was a big wrestling fan, as well. So of course she's a girl, and she sees this bodybuilding dude with long blonde hair. Of course she's gonna like fucking Kerry Von Erich, goddamn women. But with that being said, that was one of her favorite wrestlers, and it was mine too. I just think he had charisma, make skills, so whatever. But he had the build, he had the look, he had the talent. He knew how to wrestle. There was just something different about him. You know, he liked. It was kind of like I don't want to say. It was just kind of one of those guys where he wrestled. He's just he had really enthusiasm in the ring when he was wrestling. Very athletic. And it's just sad, reading, seeing his Dark Side of the Ring episode, and kind of figuring out when, like, you're growing up as your kid, you see this dude wrestling, and then all of a sudden you don't see him as much. And then in the late 80s, he's kind of gone, kind of comes back, has a little run, and then come to find out he's in an accident, um, fucks up his hip, fucks up his ankle. Um, then he starts to, try to come back to wrestling too soon. And then all the other demons he had with other stuff going on in his life, wrestling on his foot too soon, and then having that amputated, and
That was crazy.
keeping it from Vince, keeping it from all the wrestlers, for the most part, except for, I think I read that, Piper said one time, I read something from him that, him, those two used to talk a lot. And, when they were on the road, Von Erich was just cool with just letting loose with Piper, and didn't care about his prosthetic foot, and, hid it from a lot of people except for a couple, and Piper was one of them. But, just to have to go through that, and just wrestling on a prosthetic, like no one was doing that back then,
Yeah.
and just, you really didn't see that much of a difference in his in-ring performance when he was wrestling with his prosthetic foot, to be honest. Like, I really didn't pay attention too much. But I just thought he was somebody who could have, with his demons and getting injured and other stuff, he could have had, a good career. I wouldn't say he would have been a great superstar, but he was just somebody that I thought could have been, you know, that higher than mid-car, and been in a couple, heavyweight title fights and whatnot. I mean, he won a couple heavyweight belts, I believe, in the NWA. I think he beat Harley Race for the NWA heavyweight title, and then he had the Intercontinental title in WWF, I believe.
He actually beat Ric Flair for the NWA title.
Was it Flair? He had matches with Harley Race as well, so it's probably right. Probably was.
He was. I liked him too. I just watched, because I've been watching stuff from around then. I just watched like the Survivor Series where he was on the Ultimate Warriors team. Yeah. And I watched him beat Mr. Perfect at SummerSlam. I liked him a lot too, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it was cool. Like, wasn't that him, Ultimate Warrior, and was it the Legion of Doom?
Yeah.
Was on the team.
I actually told my wife that was one of the best like Survivor Series teams ever. So.
Oh yeah, I mean.
That was cool too, because they called the team name was the Warriors, because he had the Ultimate Warrior. Kerry Von Erich had used the nickname the Modern Day Warrior in World's Class.
And the Road Warriors.
The LD, of course, were the Road Warriors. And supposedly that was how they came up with the Ultimate Warrior name, because it was like, he wasn't the Road Warrior, he wasn't the Modern Day Warrior, he's Ultimate Warrior. So
that was my favorite. That was like my favorite. That was one of my. I'm not trying to steal your thunder, Joe. That was my favorite Survivor. That was my favorite Survivor Series team ever. That those four guys together. So.
You had a lot of character on that team.
Yeah.
I actually got to meet Kerry Von Erich once.
Nice.
Way back in 1992, he did an autograph signing and appearance at the Plainfield Township Firehouse, just up the road from where I live. And, he seemed like, he was a really nice guy. He was smiling. He was happy. And, unfortunately, it was about a year before he died. And, I remember finding that out in one of the wrestling magazines. And when I read that it was suicide too, it was really
non-internet era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, AJ, do you want to go next, or you want me to go next?
No, I'll go.
All right, go for it.
My Mount Rushmore head's Eddie Guerrero. So he's the theme with me today is we're dealing with people I didn't particularly like, but Eddie Guerrero was like really good at what he did, and I think I liked him more. Like after he died, I read his book and I respected him more because I realized at that point he had kind of like exorcised his demons per se, but he was just too far gone at that point. Essentially, like he had actually tried to get himself out of that situation, but I think his past just came back to get him eventually. But he had like went out of his way and worked hard to get out of that situation. It just caught up with him. But he was really good in the ring, and he did a lot of good things. He actually had a long career, but there was more to come. There was more to come with him. So he was special. Like he was really special. Even like I said, even though I didn't particularly like him, he was really good at what he did. He had all the intangible stuff that you need. He good charisma. He was good on the mic. He could wrestle. He could pretty much do all of it. So he beat Brock Lesnar when I didn't want him to beat Brock Lesnar, so I didn't really like him at that point. So
he was one of those guys who could have had like he had that first, second, third, and fourth act. He could have had multiple acts, like reinventing himself as a wrestler. He seemed really good at doing that for himself.
He was special, and his book was very good. When I don't really particularly like somebody, then I read their book and I like them. Maybe I missed the boat on that one a little bit. You know, some of that's my fault probably. So, but you guys all know me. If I don't like the guy, I don't like him usually. There's not a lot of middle ground with me, so.
That's more than half of the wrestlers right now, guys. So just put it that way.
I always thought the really interesting thing with Eddie was like if you look at like the last 2 years of his career there, you know they gave him the singles run after they broke him away from Chavo. They put the title on him, and they really turned him into like the super top baby face. And then after he lost the belt and he did a few more programs and everything. Then they turned him back into just like the ultimate scumbag heel with the whole Rey Mysterio and Dominic angle and everything. So that just right there showed you just how versatile he was because he went from being like the happy-go-lucky guy who came out of the lowrider, was always smiling and laughing, and the fans loved him. And then you remember they like slowed his theme music down. He'd stop using the lowrider. He'd come out to the ring walking really slowly with a huge frown on his face and just scowling at everybody. And they hated him so much. And I think the other thing too was I think they pretty much said that they were about to put the title back on him. Like he was going to probably beat Batista.
You're welcome, Rey Mysterio. So that's the only reason Mysterio won. So I still believe that to this day. So
I mean, it definitely is. They wanted the feel-good story and everything, but it's like, so that's sad because it's like okay, he would have been a multiple-time champion, and then you really couldn't have like had an argument against him saying like, oh well, they gave him one run with the title, that was it, so it was a fluke. It's like because I think whenever you put a title on a guy more than once, you're pretty much saying he's a top guy no matter what.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Go ahead,
All right,
Jeremy.
so we've got Brian Pillman, we've got Kerry Von Erich, we've got Eddie Guerrero, and my pick to go on Mount Rushmore. Even though I, only saw this career briefly because of when he started, and I'm gonna give a little introduction. Oh, what a rush! I gotta go with Hawk from the Road Warriors or the Legion of Doom, whatever you want to call their tag team. I personally love watching them as a tag team because these guys wrestled in the era like the early 80s all the way through, I think, the mid-90s. Somebody correct me.
The gimmick era. They were entrenched in the gimmick era.
But they were legitimate, tough guys.
Badasses.
Like, sons of bitches.
They were real badasses. Like, they were, when they weren't wrestling, when they were, just getting into wrestling too, they were bouncers in bars and literally became bouncers in bars to beat the shit out of people. Like, because Hawk had a serious anger issue. So I mean, it's crazy, but I really liked him. I always loved their introduction. I always loved the football pads with the spikes coming out of them. I thought it made them look like real badasses. I enjoyed Mad Max, and I know that's where that kind of came from, the Mad Max movie with those, with the gimmick a little bit. So it was just, they were fun to watch. And like I said, knowing that they were legitimate, like tough guys, they weren't like just big muscle guys for the sake of being muscle guys, like some guys in wrestling are. They'd have literally beat the shit out of you if you would have stepped up to them, and they wouldn't have thought 2 seconds about it. It's crazy. So
they were cool. They were like cool when you were a kid. When we were all kids, they were cool. Like
Yes.
everything about them was cool. Like I still watch stuff with them, and I'm like, they were pretty cool back then. Like as a kid, they were like exactly what the kind of thing that got me into wrestling. They were one of the things, like the LOD or Road Warriors. They were cool. Like they're arguably one of the 2 or 3 best tag teams of all time, I think. So
I think about it too. The 80s was like the tag team decade. Like all the tag teams that were in the WWF in the 80s, and for them to stand out in that manner and just be so like over the top and stiff wrestlers and just throwing fucking guys around in the ring and things of that nature. That was perfect.
For the first like 15 years I was watching wrestling, they had the best tag team finisher. Their finisher was so awesome.
God.
The Doomsday Device.
The Doomsday Device. I mean,
that shit.
The 3
awesome.
Other things came along, but for a long, long time, they had the coolest finishing maneuver as a tag team for years.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have wanted to take that move. That's for sure.
I'm pretty sure Matt Blackton took it. I'm pretty sure Matt Blackton let us do it to him once.
Like AJ said, the interesting thing about them again was how cool they were, and I think it was like once they really got established, it was really at a point where it's like everybody was just going to cheer for them. It was kind of impossible to turn them heel. I think the only time anybody tried to was in Crockett. I don't remember what year it was, but Dusty was doing the booking. So how did Dusty try to turn them heel? By having them attack him. They did the thing where they took one of the spikes off and they tried to like gouge Dusty's eye out with it, and Dusty bled, and that's how Dusty got fired. So it must have been '88, I guess.
The Midnight Rider.
Well, it
came back as the
yeah, but that's just it. It's like they were also so unique, not just because of like their look and everything, but they were the monster baby faces.
Mm-hmm.
That's like in wrestling. That's like an oxymoron. You have plenty of monster heels, but you never really had monster baby faces. I mean, maybe Hogan could fit into that description, and the Warrior to an extent, and I guess maybe Undertaker once he was a face. But I mean, for the most part, again, you don't have monster baby faces, but they pretty much were. And like Joe said, like the '80s were such a great tag team era in WWF, but I mean, outside of WWF too, because the Road Warriors didn't come into WWF until '90. So like they spent the '80s wrestling,
WCW and
it's like you got the Steiners and Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson and Ole Anderson and the Midnight Express and the Rock and Roll Express and the Fantastics and the Freebirds and the Sheepherders. Yes, I'm referring to the Bushwhackers before they were the Bushwhackers.
And they were like
before they were the Bushwhackers. So yeah, it's like it was an amazing tag team era.
And when you're like that cool, they mimic the Warlord and the Barbarian tried to mimic them, and Demolition clearly tried to rip them off. You're really
the
cool
heel version. Demolition.
When somebody tries to rip you off, and I liked Demolition. I did. I liked Demolition, but they were a 100% rip off, and even the Warlord and the Barbarian were kind of rip offs. So you've reached that point when they're trying to copy your thing.
Yeah. All right, fans. So to wrap up our Mount Rushmore, we've got Brian Pillman, we have Kerry Von Erich, we have Eddie Guerrero and Hawk from the Legion of Doom. That is our Mount Rushmore. And Theo, take us home, my brother.
Oh, I'm taking us home?
You're taking us home?
I just got to open my door and go on the other thing and lay down on my couch before I have to work my midnight shift. So that's where my home's going to be right now. Listen, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed our episode tonight. We'll have many to come. We don't just talk about wrestling. We talk about other sports. We talk about a lot of different things. So I hope you enjoyed it. So everyone, peace out. Have a great evening. Talk to you later.
Goodbye, everybody.